All right, so we played Not Games the last day or so, right? Let's discuss those debrief, talk about what that experience was like, and then try to craft a definition of a game today. So, our gameplay debrief. Was it fun what you did the last couple of days, specifically yesterday with those games? I see some this and some this. So the answer as a whole was to a point, but not really. Would you want to keep doing it? When I break out the real games, we'll be playing those for a period of about 2 weeks. And we're going to have a series of a process you're going to go through where I'm going to have you learn the rules and break out the pieces and learn the process for how it's played. And then analyze that. And then get into a first game session that's never going to get finished in the period. And analyze what that looks like. And then go through and play through the game a few times and discuss that. You're going to have fun. It's going to be a period, like I said, 2 weeks of going through that process. I think you're going to enjoy that more than this. But tell me, if it wasn't fun for you, that's good. But why wasn't it fun?
It was kind of just like competitive or war. It's just the same thing over and over again. Just different stuff.
Okay. Competitive. What else?
Completely luck-based.
Completely luck-based. Did anybody yesterday, in any of the games that you played, feel like it wasn't completely luck-based? I'm going to let you in on a little secret of game design. The games you played were all designed for children. All of them. Children do not understand the concept of luck and chance. Children believe that the act of spinning a spinner or drawing a card or rolling a dice is a thing that they have an effect on. So they believe that by drawing a card, they have had an impact on the game. They believe that by rolling the dice, they've had an impact on the game. You will find more children's games that use those kinds of mechanics because children believe that those kinds of mechanics are things that they have an impact on. You all understand you have no impact on those mechanics. Understand that you're making games for people older than 7, that you need to give them something to do beyond that. Does that make sense? Okay. What did it take to win yesterday?
Absolutely nothing.
Absolutely nothing, especially with war. The only thing it took to win was to be persistent and not get tired of sitting there, keep on doing it, right? What else? What else did it take to win yesterday? Luck. Okay. Have you played games before where the answers to these questions were different? Where you took something to win that you could understand and apply yourself to?
Checkers.
I'm so glad you brought up checkers. Checkers is also a bad game for a different reason. We're going to talk about checkers later on in the class. I'm going to give you a different series of bad games later in the class that are not these ones. These ones are so bad as to be unredeemable, these ones. These games we just played. I'm going to give you a different series of bad games later in the class that are not unredeemable, but rather are redeemable. They're called classic games or traditional games. Games that most of us play because everyone knows how to play them. Checkers, tic-tac-toe, battleship, that kind of stuff. They're bad games for other reasons. Did you know that if checkers, if you're playing with somebody who knows how it works, they can play the game such that they either win or force a tie every time? That's how checkers works. Checkers is built such that the person who knows how the game functions can make it so that you never win. And so that's something we're going to discuss later. But checkers, at least, is better than what we played yesterday, right? What were you going to say?
Stratego.
Stratego. You know what to do with Stratego. There's a plan and a process to that, right? It's a simpler game, but it's not to the level of what we did yesterday. They're good one to break down when we're thinking about some of the processes the next couple of weeks. So good. Consider those. Did it take skill to win yesterday? I think we can confidently say no. Was anybody able to consistently win yesterday, over and over again? If they were, that was luck, right? There was no reason why they were able to consistently win. In a competitive game, does anybody here play games that are competitive? What do you play?
Well, sometimes, I tend to play 64.
64. What's 64?
So basically, you have it's a card game, almost like War, but a lot different because you're given random cards at the beginning, and you're allowed to play them in any way you want, and you need a set of 3 or more
Okay.
to place it down and yell 64,
Okay.
like clear. And say you're on, like you have 4 cards in your hand, so the wild card is 4. So if you get a 4, you can use that any place that you want.
Okay.
And it just keeps going until you eventually reach base. And if somebody yells clear and you still have cards in your hand, then those are counted as points against you.
Okay. So it's a game, it's a classic card game of get rid of your hand by making sets of some kind. There's a number of different games like that, they have different rules, but the basic idea is get rid of your cards by making sets of cards in different ways. Does anybody else play a competitive game of some kind where you can compete with other people?
Chess, but is that like checkers?
No, it's not actually. Chess is still debatable as to whether it's a good game by today's standards, but it's different than checkers because chess is a game that we've clearly shown people can continue to get better at it, and there are grandmasters of chess, right? So we can say confidently it takes skill to win at chess, and people can consistently win at chess. That can be true of checkers as well. As I said, the problem with checkers is a person can reach a certain point where once they know everything there is to know about checkers, they'll block you out every time. Whereas chess is a little more back and forth. Okay? Did you feel valued or valuable yesterday while playing? Would you like to feel that way while playing a game? You like to feel like what you do matters in some way. For everyone who played yesterday, did you feel as if you could sit there and let one player do the game and just watch and it wouldn't make a difference? That's the problem with yesterday's games. Did you think that would have been the case before you came yesterday? If I had said to you all these things about Candyland or Shoots and Ladders before you played them yesterday, would you have thought that? For most of you, you probably have fond memories of these games as kids, and you probably didn't realize they were what they were until you actually played them again. At any point yesterday, were you tempted to make house rules? How many of you were tempted to make house rules yesterday? That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Because that means that you're having your game designer brain on, and you're thinking about what you could do to improve things. Did you have anything specific in mind, Colby?
For war, I just thought like everyone had like a chance to just like call back like reinforcements where you can initiate war whenever, just so
Okay.
that like you could almost, I don't know, get cards moving around more.
So you realize that the key to getting somebody out in war was doing the war action, dumping cards on the table, right? Now, let's think about this with war. The biggest problem with a war, when you dump out the free cards, is the fact that you don't know what your 4th card is going to be, right? So we'd have to almost add a mechanic where you could stack the deck and play with your cards in some way. That'd be something to think about, right? And this is where the game designer brain turns on. You start thinking, okay, how do I make this flexible? How do I add a mechanic that can do X, Y, Z? But you immediately started realizing what the win condition was for war and how to impact it differently. That's good. Anybody else house rules yesterday? You guys, I saw hands over here. Shoots and Ladders. I'm sorry, your name? Jevin. What kind of house rules were you thinking of?
But like when you get a snake on any tile, it's automatically 50 down.
So when you hit any part of the snake. So it would make the game a little bit more dangerous. So any part of the snake would knock you down instead of just the head. And that would be something you have to play with and see. Does this improve gameplay? Does it make it fun or not? You have to do it and see what happens. Connor.
I'm thinking just like maybe a single special ability that you have that you can like make players skip it. They can only like use it once a game and have to use it at the right moment.
And you'll notice a lot of your games, so you get a special ability once per game you can use to skip a player's turn. A lot of games do things like this, where the players have, I represented it in the form of cards, but a card or a token or a thing that they can use up to accomplish some kind of a goal in the game. These are represented by lots of different things in games. Most games give you the ability to do that because that's what gives you your ability to impact that game. If you don't have that, you feel helpless. And you felt helpless yesterday because none of those games gave you the ability to impact them. Let's talk about Monopoly. How many of you have played Monopoly? Put your hands nice and high in the air. Now, only keep your hand up if you have played unthemed Monopoly. Original Monopoly with no theme added to it. I'm not talking about Star Wars Monopoly or Penn State Monopoly or Kentucky Monopoly. Keep your hand up if you've played unthemed Monopoly. Original with the original spaces and stuff. Okay, now, put your hand down if you know you play with house rules that your family plays with. Put your hand down. If you know you play with house rules. Okay, so keep your hands up high if your hands are up. Put your hand down if your family ever puts money in the middle of the board. Put your hand down if you ever put money in the middle of the board. So if you, a lot of times people play such that you have to pay a tax, or you have to pay for different things. Those things go into the middle of the board. If you ever do that, put your hand down. Our hands up high, those of you who are left. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I got 10 people left who think they play with original Monopoly rules. All right. Let's try to remember back to the last time you played Monopoly now. Keep your hands up high. I know it's tiring. When someone lands on a space, somebody chooses not to buy that space, the person who lands on it. What's the next thing that happens?
Isn't there like you can auction it off?
It must be auctioned off to the next person. If your family does not play that way, put your hand down. When a person lands on a space, if they choose not to buy it, that space must be auctioned off to the highest bidder. And that's the original rules for the game. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4. We got 5 people left. All right, you put your hands down. Out of the entire class who thought they played Monopoly, 5 people play with sort of original rules. Let's look at the actual original rules for Monopoly. All right, this is the original rules printed back from 1933. And these were word of mouth. Basically what happened was there was this lady who was trying to make a point. She was kind of communist. And keep in mind, this is before we were in the Red Scare, anti-communism stuff. Okay? It was before all that. And she wanted to prove a point about monopolies and capitalism. And she made a game called the Landlord Game. And she designed it, and she drew it all out, and people played it. And it passed by word of mouth from friends of hers to this guy named Charles Darrow in Germantown, Pennsylvania. And he made his own version of it, remembering what the rules were that his friends had told him. He called it Monopoly. Parker Brothers bought his patent. And then they also paid her $500 for hers. And it blew up into this game called Monopoly. But she was making it specifically to make a point about how horrible this experience would be if people have monopolies on land. So, original rules. Again, when somebody lands on a space, if they don't want to buy it, it must be auctioned off to the highest bidder immediately. Other rules, that most people don't play with include houses must be torn down to make money before you can make money in any other way. So you have houses that you built up. The first thing you have to do to make money when you need money is to tear your houses down and get rid of those for half price, what you paid for them. Did anybody play with those rules? Okay, you have to rip your houses down at half the price you paid for them to make money before you can do anything else to make money in the game. And then otherwise, if somebody is bankrupted, all of their cash and property is turned over to the banker, who then auctions all unmortgaged property off to everybody else. Those of you who are left, who actually play the game the original way, what's the most recent time in your memory you've played Monopoly?
Like 3 weeks ago.
How long did it take?
It took like, we kind of like played it for a little bit and then went off. It took like 4 days.
4 days. And who else did they play the original? How long did it take?
8 hours.
I'm putting that right here. Miss Hammond, your first name again, I'm sorry? Kayla.
It took like 5 hours, and then my youngest sibling just kind of quit, so we had this stuff like.
Like 7, 6, 7 hours.
Oh my gosh. And who else did they play with the original rules?
I just don't remember the time. 'Cause it's a long time.
It was a long time, yeah, right? Nobody says less than like 5 hours for a Monopoly game using the original rules. And that's intentional. She wanted it to take forever so that it would suck. And yet people still play it. Monopoly has thrived all these years, for the most part, based on two things. What are those two things? Somebody come. Give me one of the two things. Monopoly has lasted for almost 100 years, based off the two things. Theming. Theming Monopoly, yes. Most people these days buy a themed Monopoly. Penn State-opoly, Star Wars-opoly, Star Trek-opoly, Kentucky-opoly, whatever. They buy a themed Monopoly for something that they enjoy, and they play it for that purpose. Most people still don't play it all the way through. It takes them forever. What's the second thing that has allowed it to thrive this long? House rules. Most of the rules that most people use when they play Monopoly were not in the original game. They're added by people over the years to make it a better game. And most people, if you talk to them about Monopoly, will be shocked to learn that the rules they play with were not in the original game. And that a number of the original game's rules are not rules that they play with, because they make the game suck. So the game, even with the house rules and the theming, is still not a good game. But in order to make it a good game, you have to do those things. So we're learning that theming, house rules, people do these things anyway, as a way to improve the games around them. The things you did yesterday, I've called them games in the beginning. Were they games? Can we definitively define the things you did yesterday as games? Raise your hand if you say, yes, they were games. Good. Let's stop calling them games, and let's define what a game actually is. What is a game? One of these buttons lets me do drawings on the board. There we are. Tell me what a thing must be in order for it to be a game. What must it have? If what you had yesterday were not games, what must a game be?
It's something playable that has choice in it.
Choice, player choice. Come on now. Oh, this is terrible. But use 2 fingers to erase this, so it doesn't work very well. Player choice. Something else. What else does a game have to be a game?
And I have some sort of like strategy behind something.
Okay, a strategy. I like that. What else? What else does a game have to be a game?
Has to have playability.
What's that mean?
It has something that makes it unique, it makes it stand out, makes you want to come back and play it.
Let's say replayability. Does a game have to have replayability? Let's think about this. Let's pause there and keep it in mind. Replayability. Name things that you played that you would say definitively are games. Please. Things you played that are games. Risk.
Axis and Allies.
Axis and Allies. Clue. Hey, it's okay to call video games games too, guys. It's all right.
Probably like D&D.
D&D. What else? You play Axis and Allies?
Yeah.
How long do those games take?
Forever.
I used to play ongoing Axis and Allies with my friend of mine, and it would take us 3 months to finish a game because we would go like once a week and just play out like a few rounds and then come back forever. Had replayability though, I'll give it that. I would say that it's nice for it to have the ability for it to be something you want to come back to. I would say we need to separate our definition of a game from our definition of a good game. Can we do that? Remember, I said before, the things you played yesterday were not games. Checkers, tic-tac-toe, battleship. Those are bad games. The difference between a bad game and not a game. You see there's a clear dividing line there? How many of you played tic-tac-toe recently? It sucks. Does it have replayability? And to a point, still a game. So it has to meet the definition of a game, but it can still be a bad game. That make sense? We're going to get into bad games versus good games later. They can still meet our definition of a game. So I'm going to hold on to replayability there and talk more about that when we get into good versus bad games. That's an important thing to consider, but I like it. Other things that your definition of a game has to have.
It has to have rules.
Rules. Okay, let's put that. What else? What else does a game have to have? Has to have a competitive edge. You can play against what?
Players or like friends.
Okay, so the ability to interact with other people. Okay. What do I call that? Let's give that a word. Not all games are competitive, are they? There's at least 2 games in that category that are what we call cooperative games, where the team works together to accomplish a goal against the game. It's different than what you're used to playing. What? They're co-op games. You work together to accomplish something. They're still games, though. So I don't want to say you have to be competitive, because not all games are competitive. They can still be games. Because they're interactive. Let's say interactive. That kind of hits what you're saying. Interactive. You guys have about 5 minutes. How do you feel about your definition of a game? Do you feel like it's missing anything? Do you feel like the games you've played bring more to the table than this?
I mean, there's one other thing. I don't know, like all games. I don't know if they have this, but like playable pieces and cards and dice, like all that.
So most games have some manipulatives, right? Something to work with. Video games do it in a different way. They've got a UI or something to interact with. I would argue that I have played games that have nothing like that. They're games of the mind. They're games that we discussed, that we played, just you and I talking. Has anybody played like Ultimate Werewolf? One Night Ultimate Werewolf, something like that. Some of those games like that. There's also it's not called Spy Master. There's some that are called like Assassin games like that, where you can party games where people can play just with knowing the rules and sitting down with a group of people, and you don't actually need pieces. So not all games have to have that to be the games. I would call a lot of those games, even though they don't have the pieces. So I would say most games have that, but I think I'm going to hold you back and say not all games have to have them to be games. There's a lot of those sort of games that can be played without them. So I think I'm going to hold you here. I like this. I'm going to try to save it if I can. I don't know how this thing works because it's just strange and complicated. It hates me.
Here's a example of the keyboard, and that's okay.
Yeah, but if I do that, oh, see, look at this person knows what they're talking about. I love it. Okay. Period. One. Definition. Okay. Look at that. Ah, it's perfect. Okay, cool. All right, cool. So the definition of the game that you guys have defined. I love it. Are we at 30 yet? No. You guys get your laptops today. Your Chromebooks, ideally. You can turn in your papers. Okay? Let me stop this recording here.